You're watching Jim Cantelon Today Television. This is Bible Study for the 21st century. Welcome, friends. Jim Cantelon here. We are in the Gospel of Mark. We've been there for a few weeks, and we'll be here for a few more weeks for sure, because we take our time. We're at that place in Mark where that famous incident of Jesus walking on water is recorded. Fascinating. We'll do it and beyond. I hope that we're adding some value to your interest in the life of Jesus, the Gospels, because that's why we're here. I'll be back right after this. You know, if there's one incident, if you will, or event in Jesus' life that is perhaps more referenced than any other by, just casual, readers of the Bible, or even those who don't read the Bible, it's the story of Jesus walking on the water. I think in most cases, there's a certain tone of mockery whenever it's referenced, but nevertheless, it's an actual event that happened, and it's recorded in the Gospel of Mark, and we'll just read it. We'll take it, as it's written, and we'll comment. So let's read it. It's in Mark chapter 6, beginning with verse 45. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on the land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately, he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. When they'd crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. And as soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout the whole region, carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was, and wherever he went, into villages, towns, or countryside, they placed the sick in the marketplace. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all of who touched it were healed. Now, last time we read the account of Jesus feeding the 5,000, and I think I made the point then, if I didn't, I'll make it now. 5,000 men. Then there were women and children on top of that. So it could very well have been 10,000 in terms of actual, recipients of this miraculous provision that Jesus effected with the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. It's an amazing story. So we go from one miracle to another. And in this case, it probably, I think it probably was twilight. I mean, it had been a long day, right? Jesus dismissed the crowd. They've got full tummies. And he sends the disciples off to Bethsaida by boat. Now, Bethsaida still is. The ruins are still there. I've been there many times over the years that I lived in Israel. It's on the northeast, not really on the shore. Maybe at Jesus' time it was the shore. Now the Sea of Galilee has receded a bit, and the Jordan River as well, which flows right by Bethsaida into the Sea of Galilee. But it was a northeast shoreline of Kinneret, as we call it in Israel, which means harp, Sea of Galilee. Sometimes it's called the Sea of Gennesaret. Sometimes it's called the Sea of Tiberias. But we know it mainly as the Sea of Galilee. Anyhow, Jesus is up there on the Golan Heights. This feeding of the 5,000 had occurred up in that region somewhere. He's dismissed the crowd. He's walking along the heights, and he loved to be alone for prayer. And so he sends the disciples down the mountain or down the hill. You guys take the boat, and you head over to Bethsaida there, and I'll meet you there. And really, when it comes to the actual physical position, where Jesus was not that far, really, from Bethsaida. I've driven it many times over the years. It's a bit of a climb if you're going from Bethsaida up to the Golan Heights, but of course you're going downhill, as Jesus was doing on this occasion. But, I think it might have taken 2 hours to walk it. So he's going to walk to Bethsaida. The guys are taking the boat. Why are they taking the boat? Well, because they had to get the boat back to Capernaum eventually. And also, I think Jesus just wanted to have some downtime. So they've gone down to the boat, and they're heading northeast up to Bethsaida. Jesus is up in the Golan Heights. He's heading kind of southwest from the Golan Heights to that northeast shore. And something happens. He looks down, and he sees that the disciples are having a hard time getting to Bethsaida because the wind is blowing from the northeast right against their boat, and they don't have a sail up. They're trying to oar, and it's just not working. So he watches, and I'm sure he was, he wouldn't have been concerned, but he's talking with his father. But I think probably sometime between 3 and 6 in the morning, he goes down to the shore. Then he steps out onto the water. Whoa. Mark tells us he meant to pass them by, and that sounds a little strange, but I think what this means is they're struggling with the wind. The wind is blowing them in a westerly direction, even though they're trying to go northeast. And if he's going to pass them by, it suggests to me that Jesus went a little bit to the south of their trajectory so that he would, maybe come past them and then maybe get into the boat. Mark doesn't give us details. I mentioned this before. He uses very few adjectives, very few adverbs. He shifts from spot to spot. He'd be a very bad movie maker because there's no transition pictures. It's just one location to another, and we're going to see that here as we go through the next few chapters. But anyhow, he's close enough to the boat that the guys look out and they see him and they think he's a ghost. Well, I mean, this is an apparition, to say the least. This guy looks like Jesus out there walking on the water. I mean, and they were terrified. He shouts out to them, "Don't be afraid. It is I." Of course, they would recognize the voice. And he climbs into the boat. And as soon as he does this, the powerful wind subsides. And I like the way the King James puts it. They were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure. Do you think? Sore amazed in themselves beyond measure. It's interesting that Mark credits this astonishment to their hardened hearts. And, when I'm trying to write about this and get it ready to talk to you about it, I'm thinking, why would he say that? I think the only Well, as I'm reading this, I'm thinking about Isaiah's words concerning the people in general, where the Lord through the prophet describes them as hearing without understanding and seeing but not perceiving in Isaiah chapter 6. These men had just seen Jesus feed 5,000 people, okay? I mean, you would assume that right now they're thinking, well, this man can do anything. Obviously, they weren't thinking that. There's this old, I see it, but I don't believe it mentality that a lot of us have. And even though it's happening right in front of our eyes, somewhere back there in our subconscious, we're just not accepting what we're seeing. I don't know if that was the case here. But the fact is that we often hide our, I should say guard, not hide. We often guard our subjective truths from objective truth. I see it, but that's not what I believe. I've believed the other all my life. I'm not going to believe this, even though I'm seeing it and it's happening now. There's got to be something wrong here. We don't want any intrusion, if you will, to rock our world. Well, sure enough, the wind stops, and they'd gone far enough now that they forgot about Bethsaida. The wind had blown them right across the other side of the lake, even before it stopped when Jesus got in the boat. So they landed Gennesaret. It's a fertile plain between Capernaum and Tiberias. It's beautiful. Right now there's olive groves and beautiful banana plantations there. And then Mark says, this was just the beginning of huge ministry where mainly sick people were brought to Jesus. He was like a mobile medical clinic. And they just had to get in his proximity, just touching the hem of his garment, like that woman with the issue of blood, and they were healed. So it's sort of it's kind of the entry level of Jesus' ministry to the Galilee, which he did most of his ministry, and ending up eventually in Jerusalem. Let's take a break. I'll be back right after this. Kosa has been a part of our ministry with Somebody Cares in Malawi the whole time we've been here, 22, 23 years. She is a dynamite praise and worship leader. She's a spark plug for all kinds of things. She's a pastor's wife, but she's also someone who lives with HIV and AIDS. And a big player for you has been not only the antiretrovirals, but also selenium.
Yes.
Tell us about selenium and the impact it has.
I started taking selenium in the year of 2006. And since then, my health was deteriorating due to HIV pandemic. I wasn't looking good, and even my weight gone down to 32 from 68. But since I was put on selenium, the immune booster, my health started boosting up to the point that in just 2 months taking selenium, my weight blew like up to starting to 78, and as I'm speaking right now, I'm weighing 96 kgs because of selenium. And since then, I've never been admitted at the hospital. I've never been sick. If I'm sick, it's just like flu because of the weather and things like that. But like going to the hospital frequently, I parted ways with that. And I also thank God because through God, by using Pastor Jim Cantelon and Mama Kathy, they've really changed my life. Even Mother Teresa Marila, she's the one who picked me up. She's the one who made me to be known by Jim and Kathy. So I'm really praising God because through this ministry and through the WOW team, they've built my life spiritually and physically, that I'm a well-known person today. I can praise the Lord every day, and I'm also I don't have to be shy with my status because I know what God has done through the selenium, the immune.
And Chipo, this is a light moment for me, but you're the first woman in history,
yes,
to talk about her weight without any hesitation.
I thank
But
God.
that's the thing.
I thank God.
I mean, HIV used to be called the slim disease.
Yes.
And you were very slim. And now you're very healthy.
Look
And
at me.
Chipo, you are an amazement to us, and we love it when you lead in praise and worship. You're the best.
Amen. Thank you so much. I love you.
Now, friends, you know that JCT, Jim Cantelon Today Television, is the official voice of WOW, working for Orphans and Widows. You see WOW promoted on this program. WOW is something that my wife and I began 25 years ago in sub-Saharan Africa. We also now are also in southern India. We are dealing with sorrow on sorrow there. We began, I think, with a real specific call from the Lord to care for orphans and widows who had been impacted 25 years ago by the always fatal HIV and AIDS pandemic. At that time, before antiretrovirals had been invented, which keep the viral load at a manageable level, it was always fatal. And so there was an entire generation of mainly young adults who were being wiped out, and all kinds of little kids being orphaned, in many cases with mothers who were still HIV positive, fathers who had disappeared or had died, and their mothers were now in the process of dying. And I've mentioned to you in the past how I had this sense. I was pastoring, on the west coast of Canada, in Vancouver, British Columbia. No reason to leave that beautiful church, very big church. But my sense was that the Lord wanted us to do something about orphans and widows. God is a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows in his holy habitation. And so it's a long story, but Kathy and I started from nothing, with nothing. And here, 25 years later, it's amazing what the Lord has done. But recently, with the change in government in the US of A and their funding, marvelous funding of various humanitarian efforts around the world, one of the things that USAID has suspended is the funding to PEPFAR, which was begun by President George W. Bush. PEPFAR stands for President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And literally over the last 22 years, it has saved millions, tens of millions of lives in Africa. And to this day, there are millions of people who are able to live normal lives because of antiretroviral medication. Now, it's expensive. It's provided by the governments, and they, of course, pay for it with funding that PEPFAR is providing them. And it has made a huge, huge difference in the lives of millions of Africans. And in our work, we work in South Africa, Zambia, Malawi, and also southern India. We work exclusively, really, through local church ministry. I'm a pastor. I've been challenging pastors on the ground in sub-Saharan Africa to get engaged in caring for, these millions of orphans and widows that are swamping their villages and their towns and their cities. And even though we haven't heard too much about HIV and AIDS for the last several years, the fact of the matter is that it has not really ever ceased to be a crisis in sub-Saharan Africa. I think we have maybe 1,500 volunteers working with us now in sub-Saharan Africa, all local church-based. Most of them are women. There are several men, but most are women. And most of those women are themselves widows. And what they do is they go out in what we call home-based care, and they care for dying orphans and widows in their little humble homes. They're usually mud rondavels with grass roofs. Some have this rough mud brick, but mud floors and just very, very basic living. And they go in and they visit with them twice a week. They care for them in terms of some of their skin disorders and opportunistic diseases that affect anyone who has no immune system, which is what happens when you get HIV, no immune system. And they, of course, are praying with them. They're bathing them, giving them hope and dignity. And I don't know of one case now in the thousands that have been ministered to in the last 25 years of mainly women dying where they haven't come to faith in Jesus before they died. And it's not a case of our volunteers exploiting them. It's a case of these patients saying, why are you doing this? Who is Jesus? I need to put my faith in him. And, there's nobody who has a greater sensitivity to the Spirit of God than someone who's dying. So anyway, with the suspension of PEPFAR funding, there's a real crisis right now because there's a fear that we're going to go back to where we were 25 years ago, where HIV and AIDS is always fatal because they don't have antiretroviral medications available. And WOW is way too small to be providing, the millions of dollars necessary for purchasing those antiretroviral medications. So we're just increasing our prayer. We're increasing our funding. And one thing we're doing is we're training our widows in building their own gardens, because nutrition is a key component in maintaining a strong immune system. And so recently when Kathy and I were there, let's take a look at a few pictures here. Some of these widows, and they're all wearing, there's a few men there too, they're all wearing these blue T-shirts, which sets them apart in the village as HIV and AIDS home-based care volunteers. But they're also building gardens. They wanted to, with great pride, they wanted to show Kathy and me what they were doing. And they had just started in this little swampy area on the outside of, I think it's Chitimba, their village, planting, things that will help them in terms of boosting their immune system. And they were so proud. They were so pleased. This gal here, her name is Chipo, is their praise and worship leader, but she's also their gardening coordinator. And they wanted me to see it, and they wanted me to pray with them, which of course I was happy to do. And they also showed me on another location some of the little gardens that they're learning to develop right next to their little rondavels. And here you got some greenery. I'm not a horticulturist or a gardener, so I don't know. I have no idea what that is. But nevertheless, it's going to provide them essential vitamins and minerals that will really help their immune system. Whoops, not that picture till later. Then there's, let me go back here. So we come back to the central square of the village of Chitimba, and they wanted me to see some of the produce that they were producing. And you can see some of the greenery here. Over on the left side of the picture, looking over the shoulder of one of our volunteers, is Teresa Malila, who is our champion there. She is a chief, but she also is overseeing our ministry in Malawi, which is called Somebody Cares, which is dealing literally with tens of thousands of people. And so these volunteers are sitting around, and they're very serious. They're very focused. They're dealing with issues of life and death all of the time, and they want not only to be encouraged in terms of their gardening expertise, but also be encouraged spiritually, which is what they look to me to do. And these are some of the salt of the earth people that you'll find anywhere on the planet. And of course, there's always little orphans there who are, looking cute. They always look cute. And we just were able to connect with them. And this is just one little village. There's so many other villages where we are working. But while we're doing that, this little guy's working on a little bit of sugarcane. Surely it can't be good for the teeth, but I haven't seen an African yet that's got bad teeth. I don't know if there's an immunity there or what, but they start at a very young age, and they love it. And then, these widows, they carry their babies on their backs, and they'll work the fields, they'll pump water, they'll sometimes walk for kilometers, per day, and those little tykes are on their back, and as you can see, quite happy. One case sleeping, the other case wondering what in the world's going on. But it's just it's such an African scene, it really is. And the fact of the matter is that our work is with orphans and widows. God is a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows in his holy habitation. And by God's grace, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. The thing is, with this funding being postponed, there's an urgency now that I've not felt for 25 years. And we have been doing so well with antiretrovirals being provided by the government, funded by PEPFAR and USAID. No longer that is the case. And so what we have to do is just work on their natural nutrition. We provide them a trace mineral called selenium, which is also very helpful in boosting immune systems. But we're back to the basics. And with your support, we're just going to make it. Hi friends, Jim Cantelon here. I'm in Malawi in a very, very interesting setting where I am with a number of leaders who oversee various aspects of our partner ministry here called Somebody Cares. And I just might read some of what they represent. We have leaders here who are involved with youth, some with safe motherhood, others with granny's care, some in the health sector, some in the education sector, some in the legal sector, believe it or not, almost acting as paralegals, some as administrators, village pastors, and chiefs. And I have the great privilege of spending 2 or 3 hours with them, just taking them through some of the strong biblical principles that are, if you will, the infrastructure of the ministry of Somebody Cares. And so here they are. These are key leaders, chosen leaders, and they're all here to praise the Lord. So friends, by God's grace, we're just trying to be Jesus' hand extended to these afflicted souls. And with JCT, we provide the message, the gospel. It's all about Jesus. It's all about righteousness that is imputed to us through the shed blood of Christ on Calvary. But then with our orphans and widows, we're trying to live out the biblical call to justice, to loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. And that's why, without any apology, I just say, come on board, help us. By God's grace, we've got a lot of work to do, but it's happening. And it has been happening in a proven way for 25 years. And by God's grace, we'll just keep on plugging until he says stop or calls us home. That's true for me, and that's also true for you, no? So thank you so much for watching. I'm Jim Cantelon. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.